are so much alike and share so many interests. The greatest of them being mechanical watches, superior design and technology. Our first guest has been working for the Ebner Media Group since 1995, mostly for the brands Watchtime and Chronos, since 2005 as editor-in-chief of the magazine Chronos. As an expert for mechanical wristwatches, his expertise is much in demand for lectures, radio shows, daily newspapers, online media and as a moderator of panel discussions. Since 2015, he's also been a member of the Red Dot Design Award jury, and since 2020 a member of the Academy of the Grand Prix Horlogerie in Geneva. He was born in Hesse and thus has a special relationship to Frankfurt, where he also spent some of his school days. A warm welcome to Rüdiger Bucher. Today he'll be speaking with the owner and general manager of Sinn Spezialuhren, diplom engineer Lothar Schmidt. A visionary and inventor whose drive comes from the joy he takes in innovation, precision and aesthetics. His career began from the bottom up as a toolmaker. There followed his study of mechanical engineering. Then he went to VDO, and from there to such luxury brands as IWC and A. Lange & Söhne. In 1983 it came to a crucial encounter with Helmut Sinn, who, due to age, was on the lookout for a successor. Lothar Schmidt bought the company in 1994 with, at the time, 12 employees and built it up anew as Sinn Spezialuhren zu Frankfurt am Main. 30 years have passed since. In this time, there have been countless technical innovations, such as the legendary diver watches made of German U-boat steel and much more. Today, the company counts a staff of 160, a branch with sales and customer service on Frankfurt's Römerberg, a manufacturing plant for casings in Glashütte, and a branch in Dresden for service and assembly. We can look forward to all he can still tell us this evening about these past 30 years. The owner and general manager of Sinn Spezialuhren, Lothar Schmidt.
Ja, ich freue mich erstmal über die Einladung.
Yes, first of all, I'm delighted to have been invited to this year's Sinn Zeitgespräch, dear Mr. Schmidt. And I'm thrilled to have the honor of chatting with you today about the past 30 years, since you became owner of Sinn Spezialuhren and have since continued to build the brand. I think you can see it here in this building alone, where we're sitting right now, here in Frankfurt, Sinn's new headquarters opened in 2017. When you walk through the production area, through all the rooms, how the company has changed over these 30 years. Personally, I think it's one of the most exciting German watch brands, and that's saying something, because it's a brand that's not based in one of the famous centers of German watchmaking, in Glashütte or in the Black Forest, but here in Frankfurt am Main. And we've known each other for almost a quarter of a century. 24 years, we figured out. I was at Basel World for the first time in 2000, and I have to say that I've always particularly enjoyed going to the Sinn stand at trade fairs to talk to them, and to talk to Miss Richter and Miss Kleiter, because it was always super exciting at Sinn to learn about new technologies. I feel like they have this ability to simply explain technology to people. Even if you never got 15 points in physics, you can still understand it well. Over the years, I've learned exciting terms like the eggshell effect, shrinkage cavities, material groups, when people only ever talked about 316 stainless steel. And then you explain what's really behind it and what the differences are. I find things like that very exciting. And I really think Sinn is a unique brand because there are so many special technologies. That's what you've brought into the company. That's what also makes Sinn special. We will also be talking about this tonight. It is a brand that is run with a great deal of passion and, above all, has many loyal fans, some of whom are sitting here in the hall today. Welcome again, and also to the many of you now watching live on YouTube. Welcome once again. Yes, let's go straight back to 1994. A fateful year for you in a positive sense, Mr. Schmidt, as you were at the time, or had previously been, at IWC as head of development, among other things. How and when did it come about that you felt the desire to run or own your own company or watch company. And when did that start?
Yes, it actually started right after I graduated that I wanted to start my own business. It didn't work out that way. I'd always wanted to go into plant engineering. I ended up in the watch industry purely by chance. As I said earlier, once at VDO and then at IWC and then with building up Lange & Söhne technical construction. Then, well, I met Mr. Sinn, exactly as described earlier. Of course, when I met him, that was 10 years before he was ready to sell, but he'd already made it known at the time that he wanted to step down, and that was also an advertising gimmick on his part. First thing he sold me was a watch.
Yes, he was quite the businessman.
Yes, that was the first time. But we were on very friendly terms. We spoke on the phone almost every week for all those years. And at some point, he said on the phone, I don't like it anymore. And then there was the company. There was a front page in a watch magazine with a Sinn watch on it, and he must have sold a lot. But then I didn't have the money, and he said he'd make it happen. Well, it wasn't that easy. What can I say? I was still a freelancer at Sinn for a year from September the 1st, 1993 to 1994. And then from September the 1st, 1994, I was able to do it again. Then the takeover was perfect, yes.
So that means only in 1983 did you get to know him, because you'd heard that he was thinking about...
Yes, someone said he was looking for a successor, and so I just thought, if it's to be the watch industry, now you can't get out anyway. Also, the Sinn brand appealed to me, with all the technology it had, technical watches, and so that's how it was.
And your enthusiasm for the brand was obviously so strong that you didn't look left or right for those 10 years. Or did it have to be Sinn? And why did it have to be Sinn?
To be honest, it could have been any other brand. But actually, I had contact with Mr. Sinn, a very likeable guy, very humorous too. And that's why I practically didn't inquire with anybody else, really.
What kind of personality was Helmut Sinn?
He was a strong, particularly strong personality, and that became apparent after the sale when he started another company. But as I said, he was very humorous, and when he told stories, you often only realised later that he was joking. So it was great dealing with him, yes.
And what was it about Sinn that particularly appealed to you? You said the technology, so he made pilot watches in particular.
Sinn has a lot of technical watches, and at IWC we had that too. And I have to say that I was very interested in Sinn, and I had the feeling that I could implement a few things here that I couldn't implement at IWC. Yes.
It was a very... a time that was heavy with a lot of changes back in the 80s. It was a time when many quartz watches were still in circulation. Then the mechanical renaissance slowly took off. Then, of course, there was the reunification in 1989-90. As we've already heard, you also had the opportunity within IWC to build up A. Lange & Söhne in Glashütte, which was, the brand was built up by the then IWC boss, Günter Blümlein. You naturally knew Günter Blümlein very well, did you?
Yes, he was my direct superior, yes.
What did you learn from him? What were you able to take from him for your own company?
Quite a lot. Let's just say when we took over Lange & Söhne and we had an IWC, or I'd found a 21-carat gold alloy as hard as stainless steel, and I told Mr. Blümlein, we have to get that going. We'll bring it for... Well, he said, no, we'll do it differently. And he had, I think it was a budget of 30 million for advertising, and then he made 18-carat gold. and he avoided the circumstances that you would have had with 21 karat gold. And in retrospect, I was sorry at the time, it was an innovation, but in retrospect, I have to agree with him. He had a vision, and there's a lot to do with how you teach people about the product. Yes, and he did that with full-page advertisements. Lange & Söhne went straight from 0 to 100 in terms of reputation, you know.
In other words, if you had had your own way, the Lange 1 would have had a 21 carat case. Then you also worked for Sinn, and that was 22 carat. In 1995, the first gold watch, I think.
Yes, that was 22 carat.
Was that something similar?
It was an alloy, yes, yes. That's what I did. I made almost 100 pieces of them. Yes, it was important to me that we carry this out in such a way that I can carry it out here.
So that was more or less the same idea. But what I always wondered was 22 carats already particularly soft. Does that make sense?
Back then it was. Today you have different alloys, but back then it was alloyed with titanium. And the difficulty was that you had trouble polishing it. Then we brought out the 100 pieces.
Didn't this watch, this gold, wasn't it also more scratch resistant or the like?
Similar to stainless steel.
Similar to stainless steel? That's actually surprising, isn't it? So it was only due to the alloy, the titanium?
Yes.
So we're already right in the middle of...
It was from Dehumidification, right around the corner back then. Yes, indeed.
But that is precisely what characterises the Sinn brand. Technologies, materials. Titanium is also a material that you've worked with a lot.
Yes. Yes.
I think the first watch...
At IWC, of course, I worked with titanium. We were actually quite far along there.
Porsche design back then.
Yes.
The Porsche design watch, and I think the first Sinn watch you made, the 244, was also made of...
It was made of titanium, yes. Pure titanium back then, and yes, magnetic field protection, and... Oh, there it is pictured. Yes, I'm still proud of it today. I'm often asked, now that it's 30 years old, you could do it again. We haven't decided to do it yet, but maybe I still can. I don't know. It's not the end of time yet.
The case size is almost back in fashion these days, isn't it? I think it was 36 millimeters back then. Now watches are getting smaller again.
It's still a top model to this day.
Beautiful watch indeed. Yes, it was available in this crosshair design and also without crosshairs. Why did you choose titanium back then for the first watch?
Titanium was... Not everyone could make titanium yet. Watches made of titanium used to be something special in 1994. That's why I started it back in 93, and then that's why it was made of titanium. So... That was a pure marketing stunt, if you please, but yes, it was also a technical challenge because back then we didn't have our own case factory like we do today, so we had to convince someone in Western Switzerland to do it or try it out. Yes, that was a task all in itself, wasn't it?
Yes. That means you went there, talked to the people in Western Switzerland and told them how to make titanium cases.
It was Baum back then.
Yes. When you started at Sinn, what were your guiding principles? In other words, what was supposed to be different from before?
Yes, the product should speak for itself, so it should do its own advertising. We didn't have any money for advertising, or I didn't want to spend any on it, and that was the motto that we had in particular over the next few years. The product has to speak for itself, and then we had the innovations and special features that were not available from others. And that, I had growth of around 30% in the first year.
And then you started too with your own manufacturing.
Pardon?
With your own manufacturing, you built up your own manufacturing because among...
Yes, in Glashütte.
Helmut Sinn, that was classic private label production.
Oh yes, is that what you mean? Yes, I had then, but I was still able to do that with suppliers, and then I practically made the models. I wanted the faces. They're actually beautiful watches. We still have model 103 in our collection today.
That was the second watch after the 244.
Yes. And I wanted to keep the look of the watch, but bring the technology inside up to the standard that I was familiar with. And then we did that with model 144. I see some of them have them on their wrists here. So with some models, 142, 140, we did that we kept the look and then brought the insides up to the latest technical standard, partly made of titanium. Yes, it was quite an exciting time, actually.
Yes, it was always exciting, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
All the technologies we know today, there are so many that you can hardly list them off by heart. But when I look at my watch here now, I see AR in a circle.
Yes, yes, we had.
This is already one of the first and most important technologies that you have developed.
There were device displays that had to be kept dry on the inside, but not in the watch industry. And then we made this watch in 1997, and it was ready. And in the Yukon at that time, there was an event organised by Fulda, where we gave dog sled mushers the first watches with this technology and wanted to prove that they could withstand the sub-zero temperatures which they had on over their cold suits. We gave them 5 watches, so they were certified, checked before, checked after, were in order and only for sale. The dog handlers didn't want to buy any. They preferred to spend their money on dog food, apparently. But the proof was there that the watches then simply achieve those temperatures even under real-life wearing conditions. It was, yes, they were on the road for a long time, yes.
So that's another technology of its own, this temperature resistance technology. So many watches, including mine, work between minus 45 and plus 80 degrees Celsius.
Yes, a giant in itself, a very big one. Yes, you then have to have an extra oil for this area that doesn't get stiff at minus 45 degrees. Doesn't get too stiff so it doesn't slow the watch down. And on the other hand, at plus 80 degrees, it still lubricates and nothing evaporates.
How do you find an oil like that?
Actually, it all exists. It was all available on the market, but it wasn't so easy to find. Then we found it and simply oiled all the parts in the watch with it. And the watch industry had 5 types of oil back then, I think. This is not available in any mechanical engineering company. And then I took one type, which has actually remained to this day.
But it sounds easier than it really is, so...
Clearly so.
You didn't find it easily, but still found it.
Yes, that was then... It was a bit more complicated to get it into production. I think I've already told you the story. Nothing. When I first came with a litre of this oil that I thought was good and that didn't work at all, I was told, yes, let's do it this way. That's not possible. So then I poured it into a small bottle from the pharmacy, about 30 millilitres, put a nice label on it and gave it a name and said that it was very expensive. He should please give me the rest back and try it. From that moment on, it worked. So it was purely a psychological matter to get this oil into the watch. Yes, but that's just one of the things we have to consider with minus and plus temperatures. There are, of course, close the watch at normal humidity, 60%, and we see here with the water, with glasses or something, that when you cool them down, they fog up, and now you can't see it in the watch anymore. But there was mini fogging, and it had to be prevented. So we used a vacuum to get the air out, so to speak. Some of you may have already experienced the system when you passed through here and then we filled it with a protective gas, at that time R. It was a mixture of R and helium, but we couldn't export that. It was a mixture specially produced for us. And then we took nitrogen after all, because Linda had it all over the world as a special number. And since then, we've been able to produce it again in Japan, the USA, everywhere. Yes, for repairs, for servicing, I mean.
So this AR, the AR dehumidifying technology, that comes from argon?
From argon. But we then left the mark for dehumidifying technology. Yes, and then for quite some time, when we grew strong in export and this, they didn't want to send every watch over here, not to fill it again. And then we built the systems, and they are even in our depots. This equipment is housed here today.
We'll talk about depots in a moment, but you've just said that you came up with an idea, and then the initial reaction was not possible. And I think I've heard that more than once. Yes, that's probably someone's fate when you come up with something new, even in the watch industry, that there's someone who says it won't work.
Yes, that's often the case. And even if you're not always right, you have to see that too. That's always difficult. Should I follow the majority here or not? It's a balancing act. And sometimes I followed and sometimes I didn't. After IWC, I had a lot of ideas. I also presented the hydro idea to IWC. I didn't mind if IWC rejected it. I even understood it. IWC was afraid of especially with hydro technology, of worldwide service. Of course, I have to say, in the case of IWC, that was true. But I had the idea in the drawer and then implemented it at Sinn, actually, very early, yeah.
So that shows that a company can sometimes be too big for new technology.
Yes, they didn't need it either. IWC had to bury with advertising what others had to do with content. Yes, I don't even mean it in a bad way. That's the way it is. It's a fact, isn't it? And that's why they don't even need to bother. Even the Ocean 2000, which is only supposed to be pressure resistant to 30 bar. And then I also built the prototype here. I think they could withstand 400 bar during the tests, and then the marketing department at IWC suddenly realised that this is real advertising, and then we set it at 200 bar, and that's how the name Ocean 2000, for 2,000 metres diving depth, came about. Tricky, you see.
In other words, you need a certain amount of perseverance when you come up with an idea.
Yes.
Because normally it's not the case that everyone says, great. Instead, some people say, sorry, it's not possible. And then when you always give in, there'd be no innovations.
Yes, I was lucky at IWC. Mr. Blumlein was. When you come up with a new idea, then get it running productively, there's some kind of problem after the start of production that's almost natural. But it's a large company, it sometimes fails at that moment. They say, I've always said that it can't be done, and this moment has to be overcome. And Mr. Blumlein, I have to say, he knew that, and let me just get it done, so to speak. And then we had some problems with Ocean 2000, and he got through them. We got through them together, so to speak, yes.
And the hydro technology you mentioned is precisely what we have in the UX, the oil-filled diving watch.
Yes, I'm amazed. Some people started that, including this hydro technology, which is not patentable or I don't know, it's not patented, but interestingly, everyone gave up.
There have been other brands that have tried to emulate this.
Yes, it does take a little something to make that, to execute on it, and unfortunately, they have to be quartz watches. On the other hand, because we are Sinn, a normal quartz watch is then also not only a temperature-stabilised quartz watch from the ETA, which would then run for over a year, I think plus minus 10 seconds if you let it run, yes. That was important for the GSG-9, the temperature stabilisation.
German elite unit GSG-9 was one of the first buyers of this UX.
Yes, we got the job because the clock can be read at an angle underwater, so it could be read at any angle. That was important for them, yes. That's how we got the order. That's how we got the orders, you see.
It's also a great design. I have a UX myself, and above all...
I wore it for a long time. Now I just wear a 717.
Yes, you can really look at it from any angle. Even above water, underwater, you can always see the time. Yes, you can always see the time, and it is actually, theoretically at least, unlimitedly waterproof.
Yes, internal pressure equals external pressure, right? Yes, and then it's water resistant, that's clear. Inside we have sealed it, and if it were to leak, it would quickly become noticeable as a bubble with a bubble, and the oil would run out first. As far as the time is concerned, the watch is still tight at first. But in the beginning, we often had that problem with the surfaces. But after our case factory in Glashütte tackled it, we got the surfaces so that they were tight and secure. And since then, we haven't really had any more problems with them.
Yes, And you mentioned it, service, worldwide service, that's a problem. Not everyone can do that when a watch is filled with oil.
With the hydro watches, they all have to come here, yes. And that's why we only have the few that are available, the UX and now a second size, which is quite an effort to send them here. And then we only make these two models at the moment, model families like this.
What do you have to consider when servicing a watch like this? The oil must then be removed first?
As a rule, the battery is empty, yes, from then. On this occasion, the watch that has this oil still has the advantage that it is lubricated. This means that we don't even need to replace wearing parts. Check the watch again and refill it, and it goes back to the customer. In the beginning, we now have an oil that is stable in terms of colour and doesn't age so quickly. In the beginning, we had an oil that yellowed the dial over time. I was about to give up, and then we found the one we have today, and since then the ageing of the oil has actually been solved, yes.
Was war denn die erste von diesen Technologien?
What was the first of these technologies, of these special Sinn technologies that you developed?
That was special Sinn technologies. It was the dehumidifying technology, because there's more to it than that, isn't there? It's not just about this oil that I was talking about, but it also has to keep the interior dry, and there were also expansion problems, and there still are. And the hands, for example, if they are coated, then it's like a bimetal, and they bend in one direction when they cool down, and in the other when they heat up, and grind against each other. There's already a lot to consider with this technology, yes. So with these watches, we test each temperature for 24 hours, which means that the watch has to run for 24 hours at plus 80 degrees and then minus 45 degrees, or in the reverse order as well. And we usually have about a 10% failure rate during this test, and these then have to be reworked. We also show it when there are guided tours. We also like to show this one. It all looks simple, doesn't it?
This dehumidifying technology consists of three components. The oil is one of them,
yes.
Special seals, and the capsule, which can also be seen from the outside.
The drying capsule, yes. This is, of course, a thing of its own, because the desiccant is aggressive, and a material and a filter had to be found that could withstand it. And that's what we found, yes.
Ja. Wer sucht, der findet.
Seek and ye shall find. Yes, there is a lot of searching and a lot of finding.
In my opinion, everything had already been developed, but in industry, not in the watch industry, yes.
Then there was also the diapal technology, which is also something where the name has remained the same, although the technology has changed.
We have carried out tests with diamond pallets in order to avoid oil after this dehumidifying technology. In any case, it should run oil-free. And we tried that with diamond pallets. That failed before we could even try it properly, because we couldn't find... So we hadn't found anyone who could cut it to the dimensions we wanted then. And in the meantime, we found other materials that worked, and that's what we use today. The pallets are rubies, as usual, but the material for what rubs against them is then made of a different material.
The escape wheel.
So that one can...
To briefly explain the Swiss anchor escapement. There is the anchor with the ruby pallets, and the escape wheel beats on it, which means that the anchor always releases. It goes back and forth, always releases. The escape wheel goes on,
So the decisive factor was this escape wheel made of this other material, and it actually works very well. We give a 5-year guarantee, which is more than on normal watches.
Yes.
And I have to say, it has proved its worth. Fits well with the dehumidifying technology, of course, because where there is no oil, none can evaporate, or where there is no lubricant, I have to say.
Yes, so practically lubricant-free.
Lubricant-free, yes, yes.
So you worked in the movement, you also worked in the case on the outside, so
Yes.
tegmentation is the key word, scratch-resistant cases. This also plays a very big role. A lot of watches have this technology. I don't know how many. What would you say, half, or how many watches have this tegment technology?
About a third, I think. About a third, yes.
This is the case with steel watches, for example.
With steel watches, yes.
Und auch da haben Sie gesucht und gefunden.
And there too you sought and found?
Yes, we had that. I know what the next question is. German submarine steel. We had tried different types of stainless steel and said that was the best. And then the salesman or the dealer said, I can't supply you with that. That was also the turn of the millennium. That's the steel reserved for submarine construction. And well, we got it anyway, but we had to buy a few tons, which we did because of the name, submarine steel, German submarine steel from ThyssenKrupp. That's something, isn't it? Worldwide, and was a huge success afterwards. And that was also the best. This material is best suited for hardening. That's how we came up with it in the first place. Now, for the other advantages, this submarine steel is extremely seawater resistant and extreme stainless steel, which is the best, one of the best stainless steels. And the advantage for the submarines is, there is of no use to us here for the case, but it is ductile. Submarines probably have collisions more often and then they're dented, and other stainless steels are more likely to crack. And this one, due to its ductile behaviour, does not crack. And that is why it was used, apart from the fact that it is almost absolutely non-magnetic, yes. That's also good for a watch, truly.
Speaking of stainless steel, a relatively new watch, or new watches, are also those with Damascus steel. That's a kind of forge-welded material.
Yes.
Where different steels are welded together. But I believe, if I'm correct, that stainless steels are not normally used for this purpose.
No, carbon steels are normally used for
Yes.
this. One with more, the other with less, is then hardened to achieve the appropriate sharpness while retaining a certain elasticity. That was the aim of developing Damascus steel at the time, but we did it so that you could see the grain on the watch, didn't we? There's the watch pictured right now. And we made the whole case out of it so that the dial and case ring are made of this steel. We had to use 2 different grades of stainless steel, but the worst goods are still so good that they do not corrode. And then etching, that in itself is also a simple story, but nobody did it before. And nobody has done it since anymore, see?
Different quality. So, if I understand it correctly, so that you can see these differences, can't you?
Yes, so that you can see the differences. This is what comes out during etching.
Yeah, well, I think the story is that they had these swords, see? Damascus swords, and the swords could either be very sharp, in which case they broke more easily, or they didn't break too easily but became blunt more quickly. I think that's how it came about.
That's how it came about. Yes, you then have 2 carbon steels. One has more carbon, the other less. This can then be adjusted accordingly during hardening, and they were then elastic. The swords made from it back then.
To conclude this topic, so there are so many exciting technologies at Sinn, we can also talk about the captive safety bezel. But if I see it correctly, there are hardly any watches, or no watches at all, that contain all these technologies. Would that even be possible?
No, dehumidifying technology and hydro technology, for example, are mutually exclusive. But we have the 717 model, for example, which has dehumidifying technology, is temperature resistant, and has a hardened surface, plus the hard black layer on top and no eggshell effect due to the background hardening. As you said earlier, one of my favourite watches at the moment.
Yes, I know. The last time we had an interview, which was 3 years ago now, you were wearing one. It was still brand new back then.
It was brand new then, yes.
On the market, so this is really your favourite watch now. You've stayed true to it all this time.
Yes, it proved that you can seal a rotating bezel of this type after all. There'll be more watches.
Now, we've talked so much about materials, technologies. You mentioned the topic of depots earlier. That was also something completely new that you introduced when you joined Sinn. Helmut Sinn was a pure direct salesman, which is still a hallmark of Sinn today. But you introduced these Sinn depots at various specialist sales partners quite early on. I think after just 1 year in '95. Back then, in 1995, the market was completely different to today. Sales partners had a much stronger position than they do today. There were no online sales, etc. I can imagine that it wasn't easy to go to a sales partner back then as a direct distributor and say, "Won't you take our watches on commission?" How did that work?
The other way around. The dealers came to us. I had constant inquiries and always said, "We don't have the margin to give you a margin." And then Erding Erdl from Munster came up with the idea that we could put the watches on consignment. Then they would be happy with a smaller margin. That was the first depot we had in Munster, Erding Erdl. That's how it came about. And then the idea was born. Thanks to this day to Mr. Müller from Erding Erdl. And then we were able to find various jewellers. Back then, above all, we were still looking for master watchmakers, weren't we? Only stores with master watchmakers in them. That's almost no longer possible today because they're all jewellers, but that doesn't matter. The system still works very well today. We have around 80 depots in Germany and even abroad, which the same system as in Germany does not work abroad. So in Germany, for example, we do not require a bank guarantee from the depots. Unfortunately, this was not possible abroad. We now have the depots that we have abroad, or if we deliver to them on commission, then a bank guarantee. But that is very limited, I have to say. There are only very few cases where we do that, so it's mainly a domestic story, depot.
I think that was also very important at the time to introduce the depots, because it also gave visibility, right? Well, the watches were simply end consumers. Those who came into jewellery stores could see a Sinn watch more easily as a result.
Yes.
It was not so common to go to a website and look at a brand's watches there.
Yes, people are, as Erding Erdl told me at the time, we have a lot of people, customers here who ask, "Don't you have a Sinn watch?" That's how it worked back then, because they preferred to sell another one because the margin was higher. But the Sinn customer also bought another one, and that's why they wanted to satisfy him, yes. Over time, yes, that became commonplace, didn't it? Yes, above all, the price stability was guaranteed by the fact that they have a small margin, the jewellers, meaning the depots. They naturally give, of course, they couldn't give a discount, or if they did, then only a small one for cash payment or something, right? And there is only the same price in all depots as here in-house.
Yes, we'll have to... but I'm already getting signals that we're slowly approaching the end. But we still have to talk about a very important topic, SUG. You mentioned it briefly earlier, your case factory in Glashütte, which was founded in 1999 together with two partners. How did that come about back then?
Yes, it happened. It just so happened that Dr. Bolt was there, and Mr. Fricke from Pforzheim. They talked together and said that they could also produce cases in Glashütte. And then, since, I don't know, somehow they called me and somehow they sensed that I was interested, and that's how it came about. In the beginning, I only wanted a minority shareholding to show the banks that we were behind it and that we would also buy the cases. And then, when the flood came...
That was 2002, this once-in-a-century flood.
2002, and practically everything.
Where this little Müritz, this little stream that flows through Glashütte, really became a raging torrent. That's where we see the picture of it. It's hard to imagine when you see it today.
So machines were 1.6 metres underwater. Nothing more could be done. And therefore, new investments had to be made, or there had to be something behind it. And then I took over the 50% from Mr. Fricke. And since then, we've had a 74% majority in SUG. But it's still a collaboration. It doesn't matter. And the most important cases, the cases with a special technology, are manufactured in Glashütte, so that this technology doesn't go to third parties.
You also deliver to other brands with SUG?
Yes.
Not just to Sinn?
Yes.
Yes, Frankfurt naturally also plays a major role for Sinn as a Frankfurt-based company. You also caused a sensation with the Finanzplatz financial district watch, which I think is one of Sinn's most popular models. Even in 1999, just 5 years after the takeover when the first model was launched. How did that work? Did bankers approach you? Did you approach bankers? Who had the idea to do something like that?
There was a Dr. Schwesinger from the Business Development Department in Frankfurt. He came to us and said, "Why don't you make a watch for Frankfurt, based on Frankfurt?" We sat together, and Frankfurt, an international city, works a lot with time zones. And then it has to have all the time zones that we can put together. And then we built the one that just built the model 6000 with 3 time zones, 2 from the movement and 1 via an internal rotating bezel. And this watch was finished 2 years later, in 99, as you said. Been a success story to this day. And around this watch, model 6000 we called it, it was the old zip code of Frankfurt at the time. And around this watch, we then built a whole family of watches with a similar design. So I think there are now exactly 10 models in this family. But they all have the same design as back then. Well, the model 6000 still exists, yes. This model still really constant success story, it was indeed. And we had our doubts at the beginning, as we were only known for technical watches, for pilot watches. We were initially worried if they would even take it off our hands. Well, but local patriotism prevails in Frankfurt. We totally underestimated that. And the name Frankfurt may not be so current in Germany, but people all over the world know Frankfurt am Main. That has helped us also in export with the watch. Now, of course, we're saying that we're not just making Frankfurt it's not just a banking and stock exchange city, but a watch city.
Absolutely, yes. And also a football city. So that's where we see it.
Yeah.
You still have the collaboration with Eintracht Frankfurt because you say Frankfurters are local patriots.
Yeah.
You can really see that there. You already made a watch, I think, over 10 years ago with Eintracht. And now last year, the second.
The second one, yes. It's also limited to 500. But the first 250 went quickly, and we sold the others for a few years. And when they were sold, "Why don't you have any more?" No. Then we got in touch with the association. Now there are 500 on offer again. Yes, actually, I think 400 of them have already been sold. Yes, after a few weeks now.
I remember in our last interview 3 years ago, we also talked about this topic, or you said that there might be a watch in the next few years, and you said, but there are so many good ideas that you can't implement them all.
That's true, yes.
How do you deal with this, as ideas also come from customers?
Yes, and internally too. For example, the bullhead watch. That was an employee who built it and suggested it, and then we made it. Yes, somehow I told a customer story with the Frankfurt Financial District watch, and then a Mr. Stanker from the fire department came to us and said, "Why don't you make a watch for us?" And then we made the EZM, I think,
7, the fire brigade watch.
Then built here, and it also had the dehumidifying technology, everything. But above all, it had displays on the dial. That was his sketch, on the dial, for regulations. And of course, how empty the bottle was, so that you could set that. Because the people who... This is for the leader, for the...
Mission leader.
For the one who stays outside during a fire, as they say. And the people inside forget the time, and he has to call them out. He needs a watch. You can do that with a normal watch, but now we've just made this one, and here... Right, the bezel is similar to that of a diving watch. It only goes in one direction, so you can only shorten the time if you make an adjustment here. And I had an experience in the sales room. I'm often in the sales room, and then someone had just picked out the watch, and I asked him, "So, you're in the fire department?" And he said, "No, but it's so beautifully colourful."
It really is.
The watch became really popular. Most of the ones who bought it were, of course, not in the fire department.
Yes, that's often the case, with diving watches too. These are by no means all divers who buy it.
That's why I have fun with it. They're usually worn above the waterline, aren't they?
Speaking of the mission timer, this is also a very important topic that has accompanied Sinn for a long time, almost since you took over. I believe in 1997. Came the first mission timer. How did this term come about? Is it a technical term?
Yes, they were people from the Federal German Border Patrol who came, and they already had a Sinn watch. But they got talking, and then the word mission timer came up, and I liked it. So then, let's do something. We may build watches based on function anyway, and then we'll make a real mission timer. What do you need? Of course, they need the dehumidifying technology, etc. And then we built something else, and yes, that's how the contact with the elite troops of the GSG-9 came about, but then with hydro technology. And since then, the word mission timer has stood for watches that we equip with very special technologies. Solid. So the solidity is in the foreground. Usability.
And of course, form follows function, which naturally also includes a special design that was a mission timer that won the first design prize.
Yes, for Sinn. Yes, the EZM-12 Air Rescue. But yes, there it is. Yes, there it is. If you retain the function, here we worked together with pilots for almost 2 years, didn't we? And you can also create a beautiful design while retaining the function, right? Beautiful design, and that's what we achieved with the watch and with many others. I think we succeeded with the Fire Brigade watch too, because it's really beautiful, yes, as you can see.
But I think design is an exciting topic anyway, because Sinn is known for its technology, first of all, as we've seen. But I think you once said that the main reason why people buy a watch is because of its beauty.
Its appearance, yes.
Its appeal. And now, in recent years, Sinn has also won design awards more frequently, hasn't it? Sticking with the one, what role does design play for you, and how does the design process work? Do you have in-house designers, or do you work with freelance designers?
No, we basically do the design in-house and, well, how can I put it? One thing builds on another. So with the Financial District watch, for example, when a new one is built into the Financial District watch family, we say it has to look like this and this. It has to be able to do that, technically. And then we try to follow the design that the Financial District watch already has. We have many, how shall I put it, basic designs and basic functions. And then, of course, one builds on the other, and that makes it easier on the one hand. On the other, sometimes you have to go through a lot. For example, yes, there is the Red Dot winner, 2022. That was a less technical-looking watch, but it also won an award. Yes, these are all listed, yes.
Yes, as we said.
There are a lot of technical watches among them, aren't there? It's... yes. We ourselves are amazed. I'm not allowed to say this now, but when it comes to the technical watches in particular, while retaining the function, and what I wear on my arm also has a prize, quite just one of the most recent prizes, and really.
Yes. What many people may not know is that Sinn was also involved in a very spectacular world record. Everyone can still remember Felix Baumgartner's jump from the stratosphere. He had a watch from another brand on his wrist. But then, I think it was a few years later, there was someone who jumped from an even higher altitude, and he didn't make a big deal of it. I think even you knew...
He wanted to prove something to himself.
Yes, that was Robert Allen Eustace. I think there's also at the special exhibition...
There is one, yeah.
A corner where it's described how did that happen? How did you find out about it? So did he tell you beforehand, or did you only find out afterwards?
At some point, a message came from him that his watch is now in the museum, in some museum in Washington. Because he had broken the world record? Now, marketing department then, I'll summarise that briefly now, we offered that if the watch is now in the museum with his gear, then he no longer has one, so we offered him one. We don't normally do sponsoring, but okay, so he gets a watch now. He said he didn't need one. He'd bought two. These are such wonderful stories, and we've had a lot out of them, because there are many stories like this where celebrities get we found out much later, there were also 85 on the D1 and later missions, also who simply bought Sinn watches without our knowledge and wore them. We found out about it later. Where others really spend hundreds of thousands to take them away and so on, we make money from it. We have celebrities. Mario Adolf is one example, who bought and paid for a gold financial district watch. And that's why I have this saying at lectures. If you see a celebrity with a Sinn watch, then they paid for it. Yes, that's the case.
Yes, that's now from 1985, Reinhard Furrer, astronaut on a Space Lab D1 mission. So Sinn was already in space before Eustace, and not just in the stratosphere, but really in space, yeah?
Furrer bought it to prove that an automatic watch winds itself up in space. And Sinn was only found out about it later. I wasn't in the factory then, and they had just chosen a Sinn watch. I think it was the model 140, yes. Yes, of course, Sinn of all brands had the first watch in space. And I know today that they advertised, Omega at the time, that a hand-wound watch was handed out because an automatic watch wouldn't wind itself. And the fact is that, for heaven's sake, it's the movement of the hand that winds the watch and not the force of gravity. And that tends to slow things down, doesn't it? And Furrer proved with the watches, then showed us with Mr. Sinn with 7 pictures that we still use today, yes.
Yes, and there are always exciting people coming your way too. There was also that jump a few years ago with the parachutists. The Cyprus demo team are German skydivers who jumped with a huge German flag, which wasn't that easy to make. I had a chat with one of them, so it was a huge feat to do something like that.
6,000 square meters, or however much I know. You probably have it in the notes.
Yes, 6,418 square meters exactly. I think there was a similar jump before with a slightly smaller flag. How did that come about? They approached you. I think they were also privately wearers of Sinn?
Yes, they were privately wearers of Sinn. They approached us. Of course, we're happy to do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Naturally proud that this world record was set with our watches, yes.
Yeah, so that's just the way it is.
It wasn't easy, was it? And I think one of the participants is even here. Mrs. Richter told me, yes, okay.
Yes, I think that may have arisen from the fact that people who deal with such technologies and technical challenges are naturally fascinated by a watch brand which is particularly technical, and they know
it's reciprocal,
that they can rely on the brand.
I like talking to those people and vice versa, yes.
Yes, you also train watchmakers? Is it difficult to find watchmakers here in the Rhine-Main area?
Interestingly enough, no. We get watchmakers, i.e. trainees, about 10 applications. So on average, we get about 10 applications a year, and can then, so that we always, the goal is 2 every year. Now, of course, if someone drops out, we take 3 or so at the moment. We have 7, I think. 7 trainees again, yes. And that's what we do. I think we've trained 53 now, finished training, plus many graduation winners and even a national winner. And 7 have the master's title, gone on to the master's title. I believe that more than half of them are still employed by us.
Then still stay on?
They often stay on, yes.
Yes, indeed. Yes. You are 75 years old this year, Mr. Schmidt. I believe we can say?
Yes.
How do you envisage your succession? Can we already talk about it?
Ask that all the time.
Would you like to say something about this?
Yes, well, I want to avoid the company ending up in speculative hands, and the only way to do that is perhaps to think about a foundation. That's what we're doing, and I think it's going in the direction of a foundation taking over the company at some point. And then, of course, with appropriate guidelines, handling it in such a way that it doesn't end up in speculative hands. I don't want to do that to the employees. But we'll get it done.
But that's still a bit of a way off.
As far as I'm concerned, a longer way off.
But it's really going to happen tomorrow.
No, not yet tomorrow.
But that's the solution.
It's a constant topic of conversation, of course.
That you have decided on.
We've already put out feelers as to how this can work, and I think we will now make a little progress, and then you'll be informed in good time.
I hope so. Thanks a lot. Yes. Thank you very much. That was a very exciting conversation. Thank you very much. Question to the audience. Do you have any questions for Mr. Schmidt? I think we also have a microphone. That's a bit too fast, but we can start collecting. First question, second question. Here in front.
Dominik Großpeach from the FAZ. Mr. Schmidt, I actually have two questions. What is a watch to you? More of a commodity or something to collect? And the second is that many company bosses have unusual hobbies. Many collect art, drive expensive cars. Do you actually collect watches?
No, I have to admit again that I'm not a watch collector. But I have kept the prototypes that were technically complex.
Then we have a question up front.
Matthias Hübner, hello. How is the first Sinn watch doing? Is it still running, your first one?
The first Sinn watch, mine?
The first one you bought for yourself?
That was a watch from, as it was delivered to pilots during the war. They still had a long strap. That was, apparently he wore them around their thighs, the pilots then. He still had the original packaging, and then I bought it. They cost 1,000 Deutschmark at the time. I bought it for my father, who was in the war, and I gave it to him as a present, yes.
Thank you.
Weitere Fragen?
Any other questions? We also have other questions from the web.
Exactly. We have received a few more questions from our online viewers. One, or the first I would like to ask here, would like to pass on is, which watch would Mr. Schmidt like to make? If you like to say we let him, that's his free decision. But I think there is one particular watch that he would most like to create. It goes in that direction.
There are several, but I'll mention the 244 for now.
Okay. I'll have a look around here. I have a few more questions. Here comes the question. Did you make a conscious decision to become self-employed in Germany? Or did you want to remain loyal to Frankfurt am Main without being a native of the city? What do you particularly like about the city? Or what do you associate with Frankfurt?
Yes, in the first year, the company was quite simply in Frankfurt. But then, once you've been in Frankfurt for a year, you actually learn to love the city. And then, I once heard a lecture that said you demonize the fact that you have to go to Frankfurt. I didn't feel that way, by the way. And then afterwards, you don't want to leave. And I can only confirm that you can like Frankfurt.
Will there be a watch that flies to Mars and then perhaps has to meet special requirements that can't be fulfilled today?
Actually, we fulfill all the things that go with that. The watches are vacuum-proof. Vacuum-proof and temperature could be that something is colder still, then it just stops. Yes, we know it's colder than -45, I think. But we can still manage that, yes.
Here came another question as to whether there will also be cooperation with special units from other countries.
Presently, no.
I'll have another look here to see if anything else comes from our live audience.
Otherwise, wait a minute, we've had that. I'll have to see if we've already answered it. Yes, here's another question. Mechanical wristwatches. If they're not needed as a piece of equipment, are a luxury item that most people treat themselves to. What does luxury mean to you, Mr. Schmidt?
Heading up the company here. That is true luxury for me.
That's nice, yes. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No? Then I'd have a final question from the chat, if there are no more. I look over at my colleague. An audience member asks, I've heard that you've acquired orchards. How did that come about? And what are you planning to do with them?
So first of all, I'll start at the end, to preserve them. And that came about because someone who knew that they were up for sale asked the city of Frankfurt if they would buy them so that they could be preserved and not done away with. Orchard meadows really are a beautiful asset. And the city of Frankfurt said I should come and have a look at them. Because we have it at the back of the parking lots. Between the parking spaces, we have fruit trees. That was apparently something special because others just plant other trees, the ones that don't bear fruit. And then we were probably known to the town for that. And then I suppose, I don't want to hear the words that they say, there's probably another madman, isn't there? And, however, it was quite expensive. And then we negotiated, and then the price at the end, it was right, and then we bought them. Now, yes, we can pay tax on them. Yes, but the upkeep is, we have, I don't even know what it's called, at least with a company. Anyway, with an association, they take the apples and look after our orchards, and it's worked well so far, and I was there just the other day. I went there once, and it was really all trees pruned. What there was to prune, yes.
Ja, dann vielen Dank auch an unsere
Yes. Many thanks also to our online viewers on YouTube Live. So that concludes today's Sinn Zeitgespräch. And thank you very much for watching. And we look forward to the next Sinn Zeitgespräch with you. Bye.